Good day everyone, so DJ Impact here basically asked me what do I think about the Genshin community hating support characters, and he sort of mentions here Kazuha as a sort of example, and this is indeed true. When Kazuha came out, a lot of people hated him and they didn't really understand how he worked, and obviously now everyone sort of agrees that Kazuha is pretty strong. It's the same when you sort of consider Raiden Shogun and her support capabilities, and also other characters, for instance like Kokomi, whom a lot of people really hated. Now, why is this the case? Why does the Genshin community consistently undervalue supports? Well, one of the things that I sort of said here was that they don't do like big damage numbers. And think about it. What's the number one thing that happens in Genshin Impact when a new character is released? Well, the first thing everyone does is they put on a bunch of food buffs, they take Bennett, and then you can choose Primogear Vishamp or whichever overworld boss of your choice, and then you just have like a bunch of YouTube videos saying, oh, this character does this amount of damage, which is kind of silly. But I think the reason why people don't understand supports is basically because a lot of people do not understand the Genshin Impact damage equation and sort of how supports actually allow you to either directly or indirectly tweak this equation with your damage dealers to enable them to do more damage. So if you don't know, you can look up the the Genshin Impact damage equation on the Genshin Impact fandom. You can look it up in Kaching mains, or if you really want like the equations from the game data, you can look up Dimbreath. I think he's got a copy of Genshin Impact, or at least an extract of it, on GitHub, so you can definitely look it up there. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, the Genshin Impact mass equation is pretty simple. You can see it's mostly just like a bunch of additions and multiplications, and here and there there's a bit of division, so it's nothing beyond like grade 1 or 2 maths. Once you understand like all the different components, it is actually pretty simple and you can relate it to the things in game. It is actually something that we've covered on the channel quite extensively. So this infographic that you can see here is one thing we covered in a previous video. I'll just link it on top. But it's pretty simple. This is just like a high level summary of what I think, or just a sort of high level representation of what I think you could sort of use to sort of understand the damage equation. And as a Genshin player, this is the most you need. You just need to be more or less aware of the different components and how different things like damage bonuses and all these things sort of work in tandem. I think a big thing is, even if someone understands the damage or the Genshin damage equation, a lot of the times people are overwhelmed with the number of things that go into it, and they sort of mistake this for complexity, and hence people don't really understand, like when a support character comes out, for instance like Kazuha, then his sort of EM passive converts into like elemental damage bonus, and things like that aren't obvious to people. But once you start really playing with it and you just sort of go through the equations, they're really simple. For instance, one of the things in the I think let's quickly go to the example right here at the bottom. You can see here, I love this like sample calculation, by the way. The sample calculation very nicely shows you like all the different aspects of the equation, not all of them, not like all of it, but a large part of it. And you can see here exactly where the attack percentage goes in, the talent scaling, all of these things. It's pretty awesome. Now the thing to understand about this damage equation is that despite the fact that there are lots of little elements here, once you start breaking it down, it is actually quite simple. So for instance, you can see here's critical rate, or like critical damage. It is literally just one aspect of the damage equation. So when a character like Kokomi came out, a lot of people criticized her for not being able to deal like decent damage and so on, and that is literally just one aspect. It's one multiplier in the outgoing damage equation, and that is like, and everyone just like went ballistics over Kokomi, and it's just like, guys, have you guys lost perspective over this? It's the same way when a lot of people debated like Kokomi versus Mona. They didn't realize that if you're already packing a lot of damage bonuses and so on, then the contribution Mona makes to the overall damage equation effectively becomes like quite a bit less. And that means in certain cases, when you've got Kokomi and she's triggering, let's say, that Blizzard Stray is set, she is going to do more damage over time than the additional short-lived like damage bonus that you get from the Stellaris here. and that's just sort of how the damage equation works. I think this is the reason why people undervalue supports. They don't understand the damage equation, and B, even if they do understand it, they don't always understand how the different pieces like stack together. So for instance, you guys can see here is a resistance multiplier. So if someone like Kazuha swirls a certain element on the enemy, he effectively reduces the enemy's resistance, which means by implication he's increasing the resistance multiplier. Now if he swirls correctly, then his EM passive then of course gives you more, let's say in this case, hydro damage bonus. So what happens is you've got a multiplier here of 1.5 that when multiplied, you can see here the 1.5 with effectively this 1.4 here, then you get in essence like a multiplicative effect of 1.6, which is like much stronger than just the sum of 0.4 plus 0.15. And that is why Kazuha is so strong. It's when you start adding up all these multiplicative effects that you really start seeing how strong a character can be. And when you realize that certain support characters affect the damage equation in different ways, then you really start appreciating what each character can and cannot do. And that's really what's like so awesome about Genshin Impact. Sorry about that. It's also why a character, for instance, like Sucrose is she's not as fully competitive with Kazuha, but she's pretty damn good in holding her own against him. Of course, there's just like a bit of different benefits, and of course Kazuha is the 5-star, so once Kazuha is at full constellations, or like from C2 onwards, he does start to outshine Sucrose by quite a bit. But when you really start looking at like what they do to the damage equation, yes, they both do like similar things. They are just differences that you need to be aware of. And in certain cases, for instance, like a Taser team and so on, you might prefer Sucrose over Kazuha. Again, it all depends on constellations, weapons, and all these things, and just how aware you are of the damage equation. In my personal opinion, I think the Genshin Impact mass equation, all these sorts of thing is pretty elementary, given in my experience, like this is the level of maths that I do for a living as well. So you can see this is just stochastic calculus. We do a lot of like derivative pricing and so on. So if you're in that field, let me know. But in my opinion, having lived in a world like this and coming back to a world of literally just addition and multiplication, it's just very easy. Even if you've got things that you need to add like snapshotting, attack speed, all these other little extra things, they're just additional things you add into the equation where needed. It's really not that difficult. I think from my perspective, the best thing you can do if you find all of this difficult is to build up a lot of practical experience and understand just like what happens when you play around with certain variables. Doing experience up by playing the game a lot is also valuable, as much as people want to dismiss it. And I think once you start doing that and you read up on the theory and you really like give it a crack, I'm pretty sure most young adults between 18 and 25 can do this. I think you'll come to appreciate more and more of the game, especially when Genshin Impact releases supports. In other words, characters that don't just do damage, but are very good at actually supporting other characters. And then hopefully you guys will appreciate like why characters that were initially looked down upon, Kazuha, Raiden, Kokomi, have actually grown into be quite like competitive, or in Kazuha's case, and like top of the meta. So yeah guys, that is just my sort of take on this comment, and thank you guys for listening. Cheers.